Welcome to ReThink You, bringing you ideas, inspiration, and motivation to start living the life you were created to live. Here is your host, author, trainer, speaker, and coach, and founder of ReThink You, Kim Lovings.
Well, hello and welcome back to the ReThink You podcast. I'm excited to bring you another wonderful speaker today. And before I do that, I also wanted to say that I'm getting some great response from my offer to do some free coaching. That's right. I'm starting free coaching classes every Wednesday, starting September 1st. To do this and to take advantage of this opportunity, make sure that you follow the ReThink You Facebook page and you'll find out all about it. It's called Coaching with Kim, and you do have to become a member of that private group in order to attend the coaching classes and benefit from it. And all that starts by joining ReThink You on the Facebook page. So I hope you do that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, follow, and review us. As you know, much of this free podcast media relies on reviews and subscriptions. So I would love to see our numbers to continue to grow as they have been this year, which tells me that my pursuit to bring you messages of hope and inspiration, life application, and amazing learning is obviously hitting its mark. So thank you for being a follower of this podcast. Now, let me tell you about today's speaker. Today's speaker is Dr. Victoria Rader, who is a possibility coach, a transformational speaker, and founder of You to Shine. That's YU, the number 2, Shine. She provides individuals and audiences with powerful shortcuts to identify and free their inner potential so they can turn what they think is impossible to possible, probable, and profitable. After realizing that all the business and practical approaches are limited by an individual's subconscious programming, Victoria created You to Shine. Now, with 2 decades of experience, she has helped thousands to see their true potential, create their life of endless possibilities, and move from survival to stability, to success, and finally to significance. For those of you who know me, will recognize that this is closely aligned with what I do at ReThink You. So I'm sure this is going to be a lively discussion as Victoria and I address the power of the subconscious mind to impact your thinking. And also, again, a reminder, become a member of the ReThink You community. I have some great new programs launching in the fall, and you want to make sure that you're on that mailing list so that you're getting the information. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Dr. Rader. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm looking forward to my conversation with Dr. Victoria Rader. Victoria, why don't you say hi to everybody before we jump into the conversation?
Hello, everybody. So grateful to be here with Kim and all of you.
Thank you. And Victoria, as we were just chatting, you're not originally from the US, so I'm going to give you a chance to talk to us about your background, but you are currently a transformational coach, and, the You to Shine project is great. I like to start at the beginning of the story and say, how did you end up where you are? So take us to the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your origins and what got you started in this pathway to become a coach?
Yeah, fantastic question, actually, because it kind of frames the journey a little bit. So yes, I was born in the Soviet Union, and in the Soviet Union, you couldn't just leave the country to go see the world, because you didn't only need to have an entry visa that another country grants you, but you had to have an exit visa. And of course, the Communist Party gave exit visas to nobody, unless you were going to go to the other social, camp, like Poland or Czechoslovakia. At that point, they were 2 together. And so, but I was a dreamer and I always wanted to travel. So I've read every single possible book about traveling. And I just remember everybody telling me, it's just not possible to travel. These are kind of frivolous thoughts. And then when I was about, I think, 13, between 12, 13, somewhere there, I asked my parents to get me a English tutor, because I felt I wanted to speak the language, because that's what the world spoke in my mind, in my 12-year-old mind. And I will never never forget how my very well-meaning teacher pulled me aside and said, you're a bright kid. You're wasting your life. What are you focusing on? You'll never leave the country. And, why do you need this language? And I just remember standing there and coming home to my mom and just really falling apart and crying and saying, how is it even fair that we're here and that I can't leave? And my mom says, well, do you believe it's possible? And, and that became a heart of my whole life, just believing that it's possible and allowing God, universe, higher power figure out how. And so I really coined my term as a possibility coach, because to make a very long story short, having created many posters with many countries, the Soviet Union did fall apart. My joke is that I've mentioned is that once I left it couldn't stand the separation. Ukraine became independent, and I got to have visited 33 countries. But when people told me I couldn't homeschool my kids and have a career, I remembered, is it possible? And became top 1% real estate agents in the country while not working on Sundays and teaching the kids. And when I realized that no matter how many patterns of behavior you can consciously practice and memorize and put into life, there is some deeper undercurrent programming that, unless you change it, keeps sabotaging you, that profound depth of subconscious mind. So that fascinated me, and I got every possible modality related to energy work or subconscious work that I knew of at a time. Went and got a PhD in metaphysical studies just to understand how spirituality and quantum physics works. And the rest is history. Went from real estate to business and life coaching, and to truly possibility coaching is what I do full time.
That's amazing. What a great. How many children do you have, Victoria?
I have 2 kids. My daughter is actually, serendipitously, I'm visiting Colorado, where she is starting her PhD in genetics. She's 24. She had a fantastic run. She, being homeschooled, life is different. You kind of do what you want to do and less of what you're told to do. But we felt strongly that for socialization, for learning the real life, she had to go to high school. So she went to high school a little bit early. She graduated at 16. And then she got her master's from King College, London. She got some time in Oxford. She got some time in Sydney, actually. Wow. Had an amazing opportunity. It's my daughter. She's Lydia. And my son is on his 3rd year at Virginia Tech doing biomedical engineering. So we've had an amazing, amazing time. We went to, it all kind of started with me thinking it's a great idea for kids to learn Greek history by going to Greece. So I took 2 kids that were very young. Ray was about 4 or 5, Lydia 7, 8 or so, and I took them to Greece for 3 days. We backpacked, we traveled, we went to a bunch of islands. They walked the great labyrinth on Crete. And then I came home and my husband said, this is great. I don't know how it worked in Ukraine, but this little plastic thing you kept swiping, it's not attached to anything here in US. Welcome to credit card debt. So that was the encouraging factor of getting into real estate. I literally went online and I Googled, what is the fastest way to make money in US while working part-time?
Oh, I love that, though. I love that. I mean, what a great surprise to discover that piece of plastic actually does something. I love that. And at the same time, what a great education for your children.
Yeah.
It's my hope. I've always said for my grandson that, as he gets older, I can travel more with him for the same reason, to give them that exposure, because there's nothing like travel to educate. What a wonderful story. So then you jumped into real estate again with this theme that anything's possible.
And 2007.
And you made it work.
2007,
wow.
I jump in when everything is possible, because everything flies off like cupcakes. By the time I get my license, it's 2008 and the Great Recession starts.
Right?
So 2 years of sobbing and gnashing teeth and working every principle I believe to be true. So it was worth it. It was worth it.
Yes. It's absolutely, there's 2 things that my mentor, Les Brown, always says: it's possible and it's worth it. So you've mentioned both, and you're a prime example of somebody achieving that kind of success because of that commitment. So tell us a little bit about the metaphysical work. Did that come after the real estate? You know, what got you going down that path, Victoria?
Well, in all reality, I think I've had interest towards those kind of, what would I call them? The unseen realm, the things that cannot be seen but can be perceived with intuitive senses. I've always been interested in that. I think when I was about 13 or so, a friend of mine had a book of palmistry. And I remember learning to read the palms and saying, yeah, I don't like what I see on my palm, so I'm just going to make my own future. So the one thing I tell people, when you go to a psychic or medium or somebody else, understand that intuitive talents are real, but they're also limited by the level of a person's individual fear and ability. So when somebody works with you, with your energy field, it is limited by your state and by their state. And so if you don't like what you're being told, just say it's not for me. And what would I rather have? And then there are different ways to literally reprogram your mind and your subconscious to support you in those ways. One of the modalities that I found most endearing to my heart, that I teach and train in the most, is called Theta Healing. And I think that's the reason why, because it allows for very vulnerable assessment of where you are without rejecting, your weaknesses, but also being able to track which one of the 4 levels of programming they arrive at. And just using that particular training's language, there are 4 levels at which we form subconscious programs. One is called core, and there's a lot of work in other areas where I see that's done with the core. And the core is when it's your individual life. You're born, and between ages 0 and 6, your brain is mostly in what's called theta brainwave. Our brains go into different brainwaves. We sleep in deep delta if we're blessed with good sleep. We meditate in alpha. People do hypnosis, or the body heals itself when the brain defaults to theta brainwave. And then beta is when we think and when we stress. So a lot of humans spend a lot of time in beta, producing a lot of stress hormones. So as a child, from age 0 to 6, your brain is mostly in theta. You haven't really, learned how to create your own patterns. And so everything that is said and done around you, you assume as the true programming. So when, unfortunately, your mom or dad spank you and say, I hate you because I love you, you learn love hurts. And then you write a song, Love Hurts. And then you go from relationship to relationship to relationship of saying love hurts, where the reality is no, love heals. The absence of love hurts, and so that's kind of a thing. So that's a core level, the core level of our own life, our own trauma, and our own choice of drama that we add to our trauma, that creates that. And then there's a genetic level, which I find fascinating because, just as my daughter's in genetics, so we all find genetics fascinating, just like our eye color. I believe eye color is 90% hereditable, which means down to 90% accuracy, your eye color can be predicted through your genes, your height 80%, your weight 60%, and so forth. While your programs, I'm broke or I am abundant, are also genetic. Yes. If you come genetically from families that were comfortable with money, you have subconscious programming, I'm comfortable with money. But if you come from a genetic line where people were struggling or where they thought money was evil, then you carry those programs. And then there's the next level of common consciousness, which is if the whole country believes diabetes is incurable and you happen to have diabetes type A, then you might believe it's incurable as well. So we work with those programs. And finally, the most kind of etherical is depending on what your listener's perspective is on energy being outside of this physical experience. Energy just is. It's neither created nor destroyed. So whether you believe there is an eternal essence to you, a spirit, a soul, however you want to describe that experience, something that's always been has had a time to create a few programs. So that's the modality I find fascinating, because it gives me access to reprogramming subconscious mind in a very open and wide parameter. So
that is fascinating. There's just so much there that I want to actually stop and unpack some of it and go back a little. So I love what you said about core, and it's the theta that you were talking about. Is it THETA? I just want to make sure people are listening. I understand theta, right? And yeah, that core. And I love how you said that, things happen. And what I said is that your brain has to make sense of it, and it makes up a narrative in order to make sense of it. And as you said, sometimes that narrative is incorrect. So you and I are in the similar work that way, that we help people reshape that pattern. But I think it's also interesting that you point out the genetics, and there's, of course, the whole new breakthrough in the field of epigenetics, understanding these determinants of both physical and mental health could sometimes be genetic. But like you and I both know, just because it's genetic doesn't mean to say you have to accept it. You're able to reprogram that. You could break the chain of the sins of the fathers, how I like to say it. And I know that a few months ago, we had somebody who she's a buyer, and it just had her on our podcast, Marcy Myers, and she wrote a book about blessed with energy, and she brings together the truths of the Bible with the power of the energy, and bringing those two concepts together. Yeah. So our audience, if they're regular listeners, will be familiar with the concepts of energy and energy healing. So just powerful. There's just such a depth to it all. So if I had to come to you as somebody who, and I'm sort of chuckling to myself here, Victoria, because just this morning, I came across, I see this in people. I heard somebody say, I was in the pool doing my workout. I was doing a water workout this morning, and this woman is often there too. And I won't go into belabor the details as to what led up to it, but she said something about herself and her situation and her capabilities. And as I swam off, I'm like, you keep saying that, honey, and it'll keep being your truth. And I'm like, it's 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm in the pool. I'm not going to do a coaching session right now. But that people don't realize that the constant narratives just reinforce themselves. They keep telling themselves things, the power of the tongue over the mind as well. So if somebody had to come to you, Victoria, and just sort of from scratch, how do you actually work with people? Because there's a lot of concepts there that you unpacked for us. So walk us through a typical client's journey.
I will. I do want to mention something so powerful that you said about the when people hear themselves. I am super excited. I'm actually launching the podcast on September 17th. That's called All About the Voice. And the premise about the voice is the voice you listen to is the voice that dictates your life. And if it's your voice that is destructive, that's still the voice that dictates your life. But there's so many voices in our head and around us, internally, the inner critic, the inner encourager, externally. And the voice we zoom into is the one that gets to really dictate our life. And so in some way, really the normal session that I start with, I teach people how to notice what they notice, how to be aware of what they're aware, because what they're aware of is what they're going to create more of. So we just first have a little discussion on, well, tell me about your life. And then I do what's called an energy scan, where I tune into their energy and I look for patterns and blocks that have created the current reality. One thing that I think is very, very important for anybody to realize, and it's a point of such, I think, profound self-compassion, self-forgiveness, and self-acceptance, is that the life as you have right now is not your present. You're watching the past. It's very, very important. A lot of people say, well, I'm doing these things right now. Why isn't my life reflecting it? And it's because of one of the universal basic laws of gestation, that it takes time for the inner creation to be reflected in the outer reality. So whatever it is you're going through, realize you're just replaying the tape of your past thoughts, your past feelings, your past emotions. And that is something that I start a session with, just saying, whatever conflict you have now, let's see where you created it. Because you're harvesting when did you plant? And we go and find the time, the circumstance, and the subconscious programming, meaning the phrases and the feelings together. And I'll explain it in a very basic understanding of physics. Every time there is a thought in your brain, there's an electrical synapse. Every time we think a word, apple, 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 there's an electrical synapse. It creates a path in our brain. The more times we think it, the wider and stronger the path becomes. If I walk into the woods, it's sheer woods, I can't make it through it. If two of us went in, it's a little easier. 2,000 of us went in, there was a clear path. But if you put the asphalt road, you can run through like a highway. So every thought pattern we create is an electric impulse in our body. Now, those of you that know a little bit of physics know that anytime there's an electrical impulse, there is a magnetic field. That magnetic field is our emotions. So if I'm thinking I'm dumb, I'm going to start feeling pretty discouraged. If I'm thinking I'm smart, I'm going to start feeling encouraged. And so we are thinking, feeling beings. We're electromagnetic beings. The energy training that we use simply teaches how to tune into that field and find the thoughts and the feelings, the time of their creation, so they can be discreated and recreated for something that serves a person better. And one comforting thought is that no matter how destructive the narrative is, you have it because a part of you believes it's the best way to serve you right now. So it's not wrong. It's just outdated.
Yes.
It's so, yeah.
Hi there, it's Kim. And I wanted to just stop by and say, I hope that you're enjoying this episode. If you are, please be sure to like, review, and subscribe, whether you're on a podcast feed or the YouTube channel. As you know, putting out media takes time and effort, and we live for subscribers and reviews. So if you think this is a great podcast, please tell the world about us and be sure to subscribe. Thank you. Now let's get back to today's interview. Wow, again, just so much. And I get excited, as I say, because so many of these things are the same concepts that I use in my coaching. And I use the term ruts in the brain and saying,
Right.
the deeper the rut, you just revert to it. It's just your default system. Mm-hmm. And I teach people new systems. And I said, it's going to take a while for you to learn to drive on a new road, take a different route. When you get the same trigger, you're not going to go down the same track. You're going to try something different. So I'm excited about that because you're right. It is about electrical impulses and the fact that you can reshape those patterns. But I think something that you said that's very powerful, Victoria, that I want to draw attention to is the fact that that inner reflection takes a while to show up in the outer behaviors and reality, and that we're constantly watching our past. I think that's so good because it almost plays out, when we say, just recently, some girlfriend said to me, you made the best decision you could at the time based on the facts that you had. And I often say to people, who you are today is not who you were yesterday. Mm-hmm. So may have had a conflict or an argument a month ago. So for me to hold a grudge is very short-sighted because we've both grown and we've both changed since that conflict. And when people sort of harbor grudges, they hold on to that negative energy because they're judging something you did in the past. They don't recognize that you have shifted and you're no longer the same person. So you're not the same person today than you were yesterday. And that mindfulness, I actually also talk to people about, think about your thinking. What are you thinking? What's that internal dialogue that's going on? Because it's the narrative, it's the play script to your life. And it will become a reality. Wow, just powerful stuff. So Victoria, I'm sure you've worked with many, many people. Tell us about, some of the tools you have and perhaps one or two success stories, obviously without revealing names and confidential details, but I'm sure people would love to know about the impact that you're making.
Yeah, the interesting thing for which I'm so grateful is that I'm actually a very easily bored person. So this
I have no idea why, having listened to your story.
So this amazing lifestyle of professional choice allows for me to constantly be amazed at humans' ability to grow and to expand and to heal. And what I always say is that I am a witness of human greatness. The healing is done by their creator with their free agency, allowing for that miracle. And I get to peek in amazement at what happens. And so, my one probably story that that I have full disclosure rights on, because it is a story of my own little nephew. And this is what got me to get into the healing deeper and deeper and deeper. When my sister-in-law, his name is Alex, by the way, he's about 4 at the time of we were doing this recording. And when my sister-in-law was pregnant with him, about 8 months into pregnancy, they found out that he had, at that point, they only found out 3 heart conditions. When he was born, he was diagnosed with 2 more. And she got to hold him for about 3 minutes, 3 seconds before they hooked him up to all kinds of different monitors and immediate medication. They were all heart conditions. And, it was kind of tender actually to think back, because I was allowed to be there as a doula. I'm not a doula. I just was allowed to be there for energy work. And we had 3 doctors and 4 nurses right there, and a cardiologist at a time of birth. And we had a helicopter nurse there as well. And it didn't occur to any of us until later that the helicopter nurse was not there for our little guy, that he was there, that in case our little guy didn't make it, he would be harvesting for other little guys. And so it was a very tender moment. And so when he was born with all those heart conditions, he was scheduled for the first surgery within 48 hours. And the speed of changes, because a baby's pure, there's no core program. We talked about core. He hasn't had opportunity to create anything that could harm his health. But it was genetics and it was common consciousness that I got to work with while working with him. And 2 hours before his scheduled surgery, the doctor, for coarctation, with just closed artery, his artery was shut down, and so coarctation would open his artery up. The doctors took over 200 images because they saw the artery open in front of their eyes, and they canceled the surgery. They canceled the surgery. They did say this is a medical miracle, and we have seen it happen, in some cases before. And so he had to come every week. He was released and had to come every week for his second surgery because 2 of his valves in the heart were short. They were not closing. So we miraculously saw the first valve grow to its full length without a surgery by 4 months, the second valve by 6 months, and then the hole in his heart was healed, and then the murmur was gone. And so to me, the reason I'm sharing this example is because it's much harder to work with somebody you're attached to emotionally than it is to somebody you're not attached to. But what it has given me is this ability to believe that if healing is possible and is aligned with person's divine timing in their path, then I'm going to witness it, whether it's healing their finances, relationships, or their body. But if it's not, the second example I want to share is that death sometimes is the greatest healing. I've had a client who was diagnosed with stage 4, 3 organ cancer and was given 2 months to live when he came to me. We started working together, and we witnessed within 3 months one of his cancers completely leave his body. But then the others 2 lingered for 2 years, and then he went home. And it was a very tender, empowering 2 years where I was learning what healing was and what transition was, and that it is anything but getting the outcome that we think is the best. That it's complete trust in the most divine outcome. And the gift that his name is Don Allison, he's given me a full written, permission to share his story. And when he was alive, he would come to seminars and answered all the questions because he was pain-free. When I met him, it was not the case. And so those are 2 physical healings. The miracle of financial healing, I think, is one of my clients who is one of the most successful businessmen in Mozambique, who has had his business, multiply in $1 million, going from 20 million to $60 million production in a year and a half. And so miracles are possible if they're aligned with what's best for you. And that is only for divine intelligence, I think, to decide and for you to be aligned with. So, yeah.
Right. Powerful, just such moving stories. Thank you for that, Victoria. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been with your nephews. You said being family, being able to sort of keep yourself distant enough to be able to do the work that you do. Just what an incredible story. And a reframing too of death, that sometimes it is the ultimate healing. And I love the way you say too that miracles are possible only if it is, well, like I like to say, if it's God's will.
Yeah.
If it's not God's will, then it's not going to happen.
No.
Bottom line, we like to think we're in control, but at a certain level, we're not.
Yeah, we're in control about the amount of fit we can experience. When, they say when you pray to God, very often we forget that it is not for God to know our will, it is for us to know His.
To know His, exactly. It goes a different direction, right?
Prayer redefined.
Like my pastor likes to say, do you think of God as the vending machine God? I want this and I want that. And when He doesn't give it to you, you kick the machine saying, I want it. And He's like, no, because it's not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's, just, oh my gosh, what a rich conversation. I feel like we could talk for hours, but I know too that, as you said, I love your story, Victoria, in terms of that thread of it's possible, and that you became a possibility coach and you help unlock possibility in others. But I know too, for myself, even as a coach, where I help people reframe their thinking and help change these narratives, I know too that I can have bad days. So, talk to us about...
It's possible.
It's possible, right? Talk to us about how you deal with the valleys when they come, because I know we all have these natural cycles of hills and valleys, and perhaps you've taken a wrong turn, or at some point you figured out you're lost in the forest and you can't figure your way out. How do you deal with that? Because people know that as coaches, we're not perfect. We're just as human and sometimes just as broken.
I've just learned to really laugh at myself a lot. I find that if I take myself too serious, then instead of joy of failing, I can fall into a trap of suffering. And I think when you fail, which you do, which I do daily, let alone it's not a good day if I haven't failed in something. It means I haven't tried to learn something new. It's like after this conversation, I'm going to try and climb. I'm going to climbing gym for the first time. I will not be looking good on that wall, So, but I think what's very important is to be kind to yourself and enjoy failing. Just have such a good laugh. And when you're feeling down, just enjoy feeling down and say, I'm feeling down right now. That's okay. And I try to remember who the gentleman was, because I want to give credit where credit is due. And he's on tip of my tongue, but I don't remember. I'll probably remember the second we finish the conversation. That's I will share the story. I was at one of the inspirational conferences with Brian Buffini at Mastermind, and he was one of the speakers there. And he had this excellent delivery where he said, when you're feeling down, you need to suffer, you need to pout, go for it. Turn on the boombox, suffer for 3 days. Because I got to tell you, if 3 days was enough for Christ, it's enough for you. And I love that. I go back to that. If you're feeling down, give yourself a limit of 3 days. Because after 3 days, I'm going to get up, I'm going to rise up, I'm going to clean up, and I'm going to listen to a better voice. So 3 days of moping, you got it.
I love that. I love that. Oh, well, I've learned something new. So email me when he remembers his name.
I will. I
always say to women, earlier in my career, I'd worked predominantly with women. And I used to say to them, when you have a bad day, you're allowed to have a mud bath. And I used to give them 24 hours where I'd say, go roll around in the mud, eat candy, cry, do whatever it is you want to do. But the next day you need to get up and rinse the mud off and get on with your life, get back to it. So this is a new one. I'm going to try that on for
72 hours. 72 hours.
Yeah, 72 hours. Because if Christ can do it, then so can you. Yeah. I absolutely love that. So I'm also just fascinated the story about your children, and your husband obviously has walked this journey with you and support. What does he do, Victoria?
My husband is a retired judge, and so he was
Okay.
he was the chief judge in Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, and it's been really
Wow.
fascinating for him to try to define what it is that I do to his attorney colleagues.
Two completely different careers,
yes,
right?
Yes. So what is it that your wife does? He goes, I don't know how to answer that. And he said, she helps people. And so that's our, okay, she helps people.
That's great.
He's fantastic. We've been married for this is our 27th year, somewhere there, 26th year. And It has not been an easy marriage. It's been the most rewarding partnership, however, and COVID has been great for us. We've been traveling so much throughout our careers. There have been some years where we saw each other the total of 3 months in a year. And so I know, I hope nobody takes it the wrong way when I say COVID has been great for us. When the lockdown happened and we got to spend for the first time in 26 years, a full year together, it was really amazing. It was like, I like this guy. I made a good choice. Wonderful. So we really are like it's kind of cute in its own disturbing way. We're like two newlyweds.
Oh, no, but it's fabulous. It's fabulous because what you said, COVID, I think really was a reality check for many, many, many people in so many ways, in good ways and bad ways. So if something was bad, it just got worse in COVID. And if something was good, it got better during COVID because I think it just changed. I love how I think it was Bob Buford in his book, Halftime. He writes about don't stress about the externals. There'll always be externals. Take care of the internal. Because if your internal is healthy, you're able to deal with the externals. And COVID is just a classic example of an external over which none of us had control.
Yeah.
We could only figure out our own life. So, Chi, what a wonderful story. And where are you normally based? Because I know you're visiting friends in Colorado. Where do you normally live?
I'm right outside of Washington, D.C. on the Virginia side. So I'm literally 10 minutes away from downtown D.C.
Nice. Okay. A long way from the Soviet Union or Ukraine.
Yeah. Yes, a long way.
So, Victoria, I know you're really excited about your podcast coming up. So just to tell listeners that Victoria's launching the podcast All About the Voice on September 17th. I, for one, am going to be looking for that. And in our show notes, we have all the links where you can find Victoria to connect with her. And I just, as I said, I feel like I could talk to you for hours, and I know that we need to wrap up here in a few minutes. So what, besides the podcast, what else is on your radar? Because you said you're easily bored. So I gathered you've got some other new things in the works behind the podcast.
I do. I'm writing my 4th book, F off Marble, I'm Free, on aligning the possibility centers, that loving doing that.
Tell us the title again.
I don't swear much, so it's F off Marble, I am free, living the life of limitless possibilities.
Got it.
And that's kind of a book that's been in the making, I think, my whole lifetime, and it's coming through beautifully at this point, as guided truly through the spirit. And then I have an amazing group that I have online that's called Quantum Freedom. It's a subscription group where there are different programs. There is business coaching. There is life healing modality coaching. That's all part of the subscription. We have a beautiful family, and that keeps me highly motivated. I do about 4 to 6 different life programs for that group alone. We just finished our Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles, where we study the context and then we change any blocks that stand in the way of that divinely guided, I guess. Prosperity is the best way to describe it. Then I have 2 apps. One is called I Happy Me, and one we're about Happy Daily that's available, and one that we're about to launch on Google. It's available on Apple, is called I Happy Me. So Happy Daily and I Happy Me, and I am very passionate about those.
Wow, just a few little things going on, right? And you tell me you're bored. I don't believe that. This has been such a delight, Victoria. I feel like I've made a new friend. I hope we're going to stay in touch. And as we wrap up, though, what would you like the listeners to remember about you? If they took one thing away, they'd say, I learned from Victoria. What would you like them to remember?
not what I planned, so I'll go with what I'm inspired to say, is that you matter. And if there was a better way to fill the time-space continuum of who you are, God would have done so. So you're here because somehow He's figured you were the best way for Him to have filled this space. So you matter just as you are.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you. I couldn't add to that at all. I've loved our conversation. What a blessing. And I know that our listeners are going to love this too. So listeners, for now, that's a wrap. Be sure that you connect with Victoria online. Thanks again so much.
Thank you.